Hello, everybody, and thanks for tuning in. My name is Darren. I'm the chair of the Marketing Society here in Hong Kong. We're excited to have so many people around the world joining us tonight. We have hundreds of people from over 15 countries. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you may be participating. So to kick it off, we want to talk a little bit about customer experience, customer journey. These are big words similar to digital transformation. And today it's an interesting time that we've come across because no matter how hard you try to create a great customer journey, users will create their own in all apps, in all ways and forms. We cannot create a journey for our customers, but we can only facilitate our customers to create a great journey for themselves. And each of these journeys is different. And with that, personalization and content really plays an important role along this journey. The customer continually is bouncing back and forth between various touch points that have been developed for them. The COVID-19 pandemic has, without a doubt, impacted the way that consumers behave and the way that we consume content, of course, in the way that we're interacting with brands. The pandemic's required businesses to absolutely accelerate their thinking, transform the way that they use technology to interact with their customers. Tonight, we're going to hear from an incredible lineup of brand experts about customer experience post-COVID. We have about a 90-minute discussion. We want to have a two-way discussion, so feel free to put your questions in. We have an active chat where we'll be going. We'll have interactions between all the panelists and everybody in the audience. We want a two-way engagement and experience from this. And so over the course of the 90 minutes, we're going to talk about the key subjects going in from customer experience redefined post-COVID, data privacy issues that have surrounded this issue that we've seen rise up in the last few years. Also, what does COVID-19 look like for brands in the practical, in the physical sense? And as we become more connected and connectivity becomes more vital, how ready are the brands for this? And more importantly, what might good look like in the future of customer experience? So without further ado, we'd like to introduce our sponsor for tonight, HH Global and Blueberry Wave. And they're live from London. I'd like to introduce Steve Mattey, if you could join us now, Director of Planning and Analysis, and Mark Phillips, the Global, where are you, Strategy Consultant. Welcome.
Hello. Welcome to everyone around the world. And on behalf of HH Global, we'd like to thank you for allowing us to be involved in this today. It's a very exciting conversation to be having. I think it's, as you've already said, Darren, it's an extraordinary time we're in at the moment. Much has changed very rapidly, both for brands and consumers, and we need to think about how we're going to adapt to that, and hopefully we're going to have some really excellent conversations in the next 90 minutes on these. I think we now have to react to changing consumer needs, both online, which is a fairly obvious thing that's changed dramatically. People have been interacting, as we are now, online more than they ever have done before, but equally offline and in the physical environments. How are people going to feel when they're walking into stores? How they're going to feel when they're on planes, as we've got Ed here from Cathay, and how are they going to feel about picking up leaflets and interacting with things in the future? But also we need to adapt to the changed consumers in that their attention spans have been shrinking. Movie makers have known that for a long time, and social media have known that for a long time. And we need to adapt our content and the context we deliver that content in. So it's addressing these changed needs of consumers to have at pace, quick, snappy communications moving forwards. And then the third thing, which hopefully we'll touch on, is that budgets have obviously shrunk as a result of what we've been through, and yet there is still going to be demand for businesses to grow and acquire customers, and they're going to have to become more effective. There's a natural wastage built into the existing marketing infrastructure at the moment, but also more effective with those communications, because we need to make sure that we're reacting to what we know through data about consumers, so we can create this seamless customer interaction and customer journey that we're all seeking and hoping to deliver. So that's exciting. So my role is, I'm Steve Mattey. I'm the Director of Planning for HH Global's interactive business, where we help our clients to adapt previously to COVID, but perhaps more importantly post-COVID, to the changing environments, both online and in physical environments, to create this seamless journey. I've worked in and around data for about 35 years for global brands all over the world, both in the UK and in Asia. And I'm really looking forward to this discussion. Mark.
Yeah, hi, I'm Mark Phillips. I'm one of our global consultants at HH Global, and my role very much is around data strategy and joining those dots, both on and offline and the physical to the digital world. And yeah, really excited to be part of this conversation today and kind of hear how we're using things like digital technology now in retail environments and places like that, and hearing from Ed as well about kind of what Cathay are doing to adapt to the situation we're in. So yeah, exciting times for the next 90 minutes. Can't wait.
Good. So before we leave you, invite the next speaker, I have to ask one word to describe each of you.
Oh, you go first on that one.
Yeah, thanks. Inquisitive. There you go, Darren.
Inquisitive. Okay.
I'm going to go with lucky.
Lucky. All
lucky
right.
to be here.
We'll come back to that one. With that, right now I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Ed Bell, who's the GM of Brand Insight and Marketing Communications at Cathay Pacific. Welcome, Mr. Bell.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Darren. Hi, guys in London. Hello to everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. So Darren asked me to explain what I do briefly in a couple of words. So I'm really the head of marketing, I suppose, at Cathay Pacific. So that also involves me being the head of our insights practice and also performance marketing, marketing communications, also brand and brand strategy. So very much look forward to this this discussion. Maybe just a kind of an opening salvo from me, if I may, to kind of kick things off. I was very, talking with Darren some time ago about this conversation, and he asked, would I like to talk about customer journey? And, we spend a lot of time at Cathay and in my previous jobs talking about customer journey, and I find it such a paradoxical question because on the one hand, I think it kind of sounds a bit mechanical. The whole idea of a journey, you go from here to there, and that's perhaps how we tend to think about it as, you'd have to drive consumers like you're herding animals, to the web or to the app or something like that. And I think if we're all honest on the brand side, that's often what we're trying to do. But I think in honesty, I think where customer journey really reaps the rewards and the benefits for the brand owner or for the business is it's really through that gateway of understanding and empathy. And we all talk about this, and I talk a lot about it. But it's one of those things, it's just so easy to say, but it's hard to do. And I'm really intrigued after, the marketing conferences that you've been to for the last maybe 8 years, it's pretty much been dominated by AI. There's been a lot of the benefits of AI. We're going to understand what everybody wants. We can predict what they want. But yet I still feel like we're still not really swimming in a world of understanding when it comes to actually what customers really want. And I think if you understand what customers really want, then you can be much more relevant and much more helpful to them at the points where they want that kind of information, where they want that kind of help. I think this COVID response has really brought up some of these issues. I think there's been quite some legitimate criticism of a lot of brands who just wanted to tell everyone we're all in it together, when actually that's not really what a lot of customers needed to know at that point. Customers need to know, how you're going to keep me safe, and what should I do? How can I cope? So I think that's kind of, I think an interesting thing to talk about perhaps. And certainly just talking about the airlines, that's definitely been a challenge for us. As a marketing person, I think...
Ed, I'm going to... I'm going to come back to that. I'm going to first get all the speakers on.
Sure.
And then we're going to come directly to that. So that's one of my first topics. I think that's critical that we want to dive into.
I'll hold my thunder.
All right, one word.
Optimistic.
Optimistic. Okay, that's my word, but you stole it. Now I'm going to have to come.
Not anymore. It's not. Now it's my word.
Wonderful. All right, so our next speaker I'd like to invite on is Tiffany Lam, the Director of Marketing and Experience at Hysan Development Company. She's previously actually the Managing Director at APAC for Ralph Lauren and GM China for Chanel, so she's got a great past experience with luxury in luxury retailing. So Tiffany, welcome.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you. Thanks for not bringing up my age. But anyway, hi, everybody. Good afternoon. We stationed in Hong Kong, and my role at Hysan is responsible for leading the company marketing strategies and driving changes. And for the recent past 2 years, we've been involved a lot in transforming into digitalizations. And last year, we launched a new retail revolutions. And during this difficult crisis, for most of the retailers or even the tenants has encountered a lot of difficulties. So it's a good way that we can share our experience with each other. And hopefully through this, webinar, all of us will really benefit from it, because not only retail is changing, this is more constant changing is the customer, consumer behavior. This is going to be a next normal for us, and this will not stop. But what's stopping us is to start thinking, doing things differently, and prepare and be able to weather the storms. Thank you, Darren.
Oh, thank you, Tiffany. And you forgot one thing. What was that one word that's going to describe you?
Positive. Stay positive.
We have an optimist already, so I think we have to go for a different word.
Well, different word.
Positivity.
Energetic.
I think okay. Positivity, fine. We'll go. Wonderful. And then the next speaker we'd like to address is bring up is Brad Lin, Director of Data and Privacy at Deloitte. Hello, Brad.
Hi. Thanks, Darren, for the introduction. Everybody, nice to meet you virtually. And for the people start guessing what accent I have, I'm originally from the Netherlands, so then it's done with that. And I'm a director at Deloitte, responsible for data and privacy, where we support or collaborate with various organizations in order to improve their privacy gesture and also manage the data. And along with that, we also, of course, deal with a lot of digital transformations and also helping marketing and sales department in order to keep them out of trouble. So I hope we can bring some insights for you as well in today.
Wonderful. And what's your one word that describes yourself?
Yeah, so mine one word would be opportunities, although might not fit my specialist area, but maybe after today's discussion, you might see opportunities in data management and privacy.
Excitement, right? Excitement in data. That's how we see it. Wonderful. Thank you. And our last speaker, Lou Tong, who's the Director of Direct to Consumer for Swire Coca-Cola. Hi, Lou. Dun, 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 dun.
Okay, I just unmute myself. Thank you,
go.
Darren. Good evening, everyone. Good morning, everyone around the world who has a different time zone. So I, as my title said, I'm the Director of Direct to Consumer. What I do is I bring the world's #1 brand, Coca-Cola brand's product, directly to consumer. Through our direct interaction, it creates a lot of user insight, and then give our fans and consumer the consumer brand authenticity, and also the direct brand user experience. So some of the things that we do here is also to create technology enablement through all the things we do. For example, our vending machine around the world, especially here in Hong Kong, we have them to stay online, create interactivity with users, and also create touchless and cashless interactions. So these days with COVID-19, nobody want to touch anything other than your own body, probably not even that. So it creates a lot of opportunity for us to look at beverage business in a totally different way. We also create sustainable drinking. So we have smart water station, allow people to actually bring their own bottle, go around the world. travel around Hong Kong, subways, country parks, then they can have, healthy, hygienic mineral water everywhere they go. So my one word to describe me, I think I'll say innovative. So everything we do, we need to think a little bit harder, because if you are seeing it already in the market, somebody else will catch up with you. So why not be innovative and start something new?
I like it. So what about the audience? How is everybody out in the audience? Let's see some words that people start putting through chats. One word describing them, how they're feeling with their customer experience currently, or where they're sitting right now tonight, this afternoon. We're going to encourage people to get the chat going. Somehow we're going to have that. But to kick things off, I want to go up to talk about the behaviors, how the behaviors have changed in such a radical way since COVID-19. And Stephen, Mark, perhaps you could see what you've seen and how have the behaviors of the consumers changed in interacting with the brands?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we spent the last 14 weeks using our various tools at HH to almost reach through the screens and find out what people are doing in the ways they're changing their behavior, how they're changing their attitudes to brands and services. And a lot of the stuff we're seeing you already know about, you're already experiencing, you've probably taken up new hobbies, you've looked at wellness for yourself and explored social media like never before in different ways. But there's three things I really wanted to pick out that we're seeing that I think will be important to frame this conversation. First and foremost, the whole experience that we've gone through has been a human one. And by that, I mean, we've all started to focus on health and ourselves and our friends and our families and our communities, because that's what's happened. It's been forced upon us. It's almost, in psychological terms, we've become very sustenance driven. We had to get food initially, and we had to find somewhere safe to be, and that made us focus on the things around us. And we're seeing that that's going to be really important to consumers going forward, and needing, as Ed has just talked about, brands need to demonstrate that they're also human in the way that they talk to consumers as well, and they need to be credible in that. They need to be saying to consumers, we've done this through COVID, this is the way we're going to behave afterwards, and it needs to be believable and real. So I think human is one of the things. I think one of the other things is that we saw that the planet took a big breath of clean air in the last 14 weeks, and the skies above all of us cleared up wherever we were, and the water ran clean. And people have seen that and they liked it, and we're seeing that the consumers are wanting brands to reflect that in the way that they communicate, and they want to think if they buy a service or they buy a product, that in some way that is not only benefiting their community and them, but it's also going to be benefiting the planet. And at HH, we've done a huge amount of work in sustainability moving forward. So, and I think that's going to be vitally important. And the third thing from us, I think, is that what I have learned over the last 14 weeks is that anything is possible, and things have changed very dramatically and will remain dramatically changed for a lot of people, and perhaps less so for other groups of people. But what we do think is that the past and what we knew about what happened previously may not be what we need to know moving forwards, and therefore the way that we've sought knowledge and sought data and created insight from that in the past may not be the steers that we need for the future. And we need to look at new ways of rapidly gathering insight and intelligence on people so that we're able to react to that very quickly and deploy communications that make sense, given everything else I've said, make sense and resonate with them and are personal, as Ed said.
Yeah, and I think that personal piece is really important. And I think, Ed, you really touched on it at the very beginning there about there's a lot of brands that haven't covered themselves in glory, I think, in this in this situation. And I think a lot of them have paid lip service to, human values and, we're doing this for you and we're in it together, when in reality it's something they felt they could do. And it is that mechanical, I think, point of, in the COVID curve, and we've all seen that curve of, we need to, reiterate back to the public what we're doing. But the reality is you need to kind of see what people are feeling, how they're understanding that financial hardship, what the values are to them around community and sustainability and the environment, and then truly as a brand recognize that and be doing the right thing. And I think there's some fantastic opportunities, and it's great to hear some of the positivity of the panel around what we can do. And I think it's around being able to relate that and understanding those data touch points that's kind of going to be really important. So personalization, you know, contextualization, all these words we've talked about for a long time, I think really come into play now. It's not just about being brand safe, it's being about suitable and relevant and of the moment. And I think consumers will appreciate that, and it will resonate with their behaviors. Let's be honest, we're all human beings that want to go outside and interact, and when we can't, we're going to find different ways to do it. And when we do, we need to, as marketeers, recognize that and be part of that as well.
Just looking at some of the other words that we've come across, it's resilient. Marie from Lisbon, you know, it's thirsty for innovation, creative collaboration, curious about the future, curious consideration. These are all very positive words. And Ed, I'm going to come back to you on a business that's really gone through a massive transformation with Cathay down to, I think you were at 4%. How are you seeing the behaviors in the travel industry then? You know, it's from a business perspective as well. We have all of these empathetic and collectively bringing that together, but how has that affected the business?
Well, we've grown 100% from a month ago. We're at 2% a month ago. Now we're at 4%. So things are going up, guys. That's the good news I can report. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, we have been upended. Thank God we have a cargo business, and that we have our best ever year in cargo. So one of the things that people might not know about Cathay is actually we're the world's second largest cargo operator. And it just turns out through this whole COVID, you know, kind of storm that we've been going through, we've needed that cargo service like never before. So we've been shipping things around, and we've actually, for people who have paid attention to it, we have actually been trying to tell that story through our social media, through all the various channels that we have, just to demonstrate that we're doing things, even though we're not, you know, doing that well, we still want to show that we're doing what we think is the right thing, and that we're still helping to provide medical, you know, supplies and bringing food in. But there's no doubt about it. The passenger service, which is where, you know, we make our money, most of the money, has been decimated. So what it's really meant for us, I think in terms of marketing, it's, you know, that Maslow hierarchy, as I was saying before. It's funny, you know, as marketers, we tend to kind of always go to the top end, but I think it's been flipped around. So now the top is the bottom. And really what people need now, if you think about understanding, what people need is they need to feel secure. They need to know that they can trust you. So you can't just say, trust me. You know, what's the joke? The comedian can't say I'm funny. You got to tell a joke to be funny. So to earn their trust and to prove that we're trustworthy, it's about those actions. So what we've been doing is investing huge amounts of resources and time to explain all the things that we're doing, that we're already doing, but also to do extra things. So, you know, the care kits, you know, the doubling down on the deep cleaning. And so it's all the stuff that most of it's always been there, but we've never really talked about it. But now that's the number one thing you got to talk about. So when people are ready to fly again, or when the travel bans are lifted, they think, oh, I'm not going to be taking a risk if I do travel, or if I travel with Cathay. So that's definitely one of the things that we've been doing. The other thing that we've been doing, though, is that there's also a financial component. So in terms of understanding consumers, I think part of what's happened is the anxiety around the world is that, you know, people's incomes have been hit, you know, they've had salary reductions, or, you know, like I have. And so obviously that changes your psychology as from a consumer standpoint. So what we've done is that we've introduced a range of measures. We call it Fly Worry Free. It's not fly free, it's Fly Worry Free. It's a little joke we built into our marketing. And the idea is that you can book and you don't have to worry about it. So it's, you know, you can unlimited changes, which normally for some ticket classes you have to pay to change, and all that kind of stuff. And we've also, at tremendous financial cost to Cathay, we've rolled out a refund program. So if you want to get a refund, if you don't want to rebook, that's fine, you can get a refund. And every airline, not every business that's had a booking has done that. So we hope that people, when a time comes, that they will remember that we made that investment in the relationship, because we felt like that's the best thing that we can do for our customers. And it's a gesture of how we want the relationship to be, that we do the right thing, and that we hope you'll do the right thing and help us, get through this and fly one day as well. But the last thing I wanted to say, it's a bit of a funny thing because it's not functional, as I said before. Customer journey and safety, security, a lot of these things are very functional, as they should be. But the other thing, though, is it's that psychological thing. And I think it's, you got to remember, for a lot of our customers, they were flying, and a lot of you guys were flying perhaps maybe every 2 weeks, every 10 days. And there's this joke that sometimes we hear, that some of our best customers, they know the names of our cabin crew because they're with them almost as much as their family. So for these people, traveling frequently, Darren Chuckry maybe is one of those people, traveling so frequently, you've had that huge part of your lifestyle just chopped off. And that is a huge change. That's not just something, not a chore you don't have to do, it's something that you miss. So what we've done is that we've tried to also recognize that you have lost this part of you. And so we're trying to kind of help people to fantasize and think about the places that you could travel, with some of the campaigns that we've done, to just really kind of have some fun and just kind of get people's minds going again. And because I think at the end of the day, there's all this geopolitical tension going on in the world, right? I think sometimes it feels like things are pretty tough, but we believe that travel, it makes us nicer as people, and it makes the world a more empathetic and a more understanding place. So I think we believe that through travel, we can help to heal the world a little bit. And I think that's the other thing behind all the functional stuff that, we've got.
I think that's kind of interesting. It is also a fundamental shift on some of your business strategies. And I think what a lot of people have faced now is going direct to consumer. Even how are we moving direct to consumer? And Lou, an interesting question for you on your overall direct to consumer economy and how you're putting in these kiosk stations, how you're marketing that. Talk a little bit about how you see the customer experience now with the direct to the consumer.
Yeah, I think I think it's been
for Lou, but that was.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Lou, go for it. I'll go back on mute where I belong. Sorry.
I'm going to change his word to thief. Okay. Determine.
It's a very important concept in marketing, Darren. Come on.
That's right. Yeah. Well, direct to consumer is one of the fastest growing area, with everything happening right now, behavior change, restricted movement these days. Corporates started to rethink, where they put their investment, whether it's investment focused in the past or future. One of the things we can look at is economy of, direct to consumer is that there's a lot of innovation going on right now. Brands like Nike, I think this is an experience they enroll everywhere. For their direct-to-consumer business, you can see last year was only $10 billion US, but this year they expect to finish at 16 billion. So the growth is tremendous. And at the same time, they will have a website so that you will be able to look at your product and go to the store directly to look at your design. So this kind of experience, normally you will only have it in the store, and now bring it ready to you. Another brand, for most of us actually starting to do more exercise during the lockdown, Lululemon, their overall business has dropped down double digit, 18%, I think the past year. However, just in the first quarter this year, their direct to consumer business has grown 68%. So it says a lot that, the momentum is actually shifting, tremendously for companies that are actually investing in both sides of the business. If we look at Amazon, most of us buying Amazon, we started with buying knickknacks and starting to buy brand product. However, you know that Amazon is starting to have their own private label brands. Currently, they already have 80 brands developed. So this kind of private label product, direct to consumer product, they manage to utilize all the insights they build with all around the world. They actually, look at extreme, not feel, they look at the consumer experience, transaction, movement, and then they're able to tell what color, what product, what size, what kind of item are in demand in whichever location it is. Yesterday, I just read a very interesting article. There's a brand called Jack and Jones. I think if you lived in China, you probably heard them a lot. It's a Danish brand. So they were actually, as fashion brand, most of them actually started to plan different seasons that they need and look at fabric and stuff like that. But since nobody can travel, they take the business planning into a live stream. So we're really looking at the direct-to-consumer business very, very different. Not just from our interaction from the point that you see a product, you go to buy a product, but even from brand or brand product ownership, our planning has starting to change, and then the utilization of technology really bring us closer. So the question is, how are we actually going to be in our next step? So I think for the direct-to-consumer development is going to be more and more, and it will grow much faster as brands started to understand a lot more how it works. I think the bigger the company, the more they're actually looking for proof of concept, right? But right now we don't have the luxury for that. We really need to try different kind of thing and bring it close to the consumer. You want to see on the launch, on the show, you want to have them right away. You want to try the new product, new Coke product. We started to actually have more innovative products, Coke flavor and stuff like that. So with our digitized vending machine, so we're able to say, okay, people who live in the central area, or who have movement central area, next day you're able to go to this location, find a vending machine, which you can locate somewhere here, and then you will be able to consume our product with a special rate or free of charge, whatever. So this kind of thing, you bring the interactivity relationship much closer, but at the same time keep them enticed, with the new product launch and development. So we're not really so rely on a secondhand information that is collected after some time from the supermarket. We're able to have this kind of information at our fingertips.
It's interesting to say you coming from that perspective as we move into e-commerce and direct to consumer. What about the retail? And Tiffany, Hysan's got a huge luxury retail footprint, and with the stores and retailers, how do the retailers fit into this? And I know obviously they're all trying to push towards a direct to consumer as the brands, but where does that leave us in retail? And what are the gaps that we're seeing that then the retail outlets and the stores have to deal with? For Tiffany, she is there, right? I don't see her.
Can you see? I'm here.
There we go. Okay.
Right. Okay. Right. So from the retail side, since I've been in the market for many years, I think this is a tragedy. It's been very, very difficult because from this Hong Kong retail, overall Hong Kong retail sales, year to date, the overall retail business dropped more than 36%. In particular, in retail, department store, fashion item, but only one category has been growing, is grocery and supermarket, double-digit growth. But these are, the daily necessity which you can buy online. But for most of the retailer or even the luxury brands, they really suffer. But there are several brands did really well. I think some of you mentioned that Lululemon or even Pure. For us, because we are a landlord, right? If there is no traffic, people has been locked out. What will you do with the physical space? Brick and mortar, there's no more value for the shoppers anymore. So what does the retailers really reinvent in this period of time is they do a live broadcasting of yoga classes, and they sell product during this yoga classes and interactive lesson, and they have the highest viewership, more than 1 million. And then they rethink on the way that how they run the business for the next next normal when they come back. But in terms of other retailers, because normally in all brands, every season they will have a fashion show or even preview, but they can't do that anymore because Europe has locked down, no delivery, shortage of pieces, even jewelry can't import. So what do? They have, online video live broadcasting with Europe. You can view the pieces online and you can order it. But some of the brand, when they're small brand, they don't have payment gateway. So they partner with, online payment, Alipay, WeChat Pay to have one-click payment, or even the partnership with landlord for us. We will help them to sort out the payment, problems to make sure that customer can still enjoy, shopping, whether it's online or even in physical stores. So these are the things that, a lot of retailers are struggles. But during this crisis, we see a pattern, not only the consumer behavior change. I think internally, a lot of the way people work is different because people has been more engaged in thinking of more creative way to generate business. They try to struggle, but they find new ways. We have more than 30% of restaurant F&B. During the lockout, what would the F&B do? Starting yesterday, all after 6 o'clock, you cannot no longer, dine in the restaurant. So we help all of the F&B outlets to have takeaway services and also in-app, scan to order, and also delivery service. For some of the F&B outlets, they are unable to provide delivery. As a landlord, we'll help them to solve the problem. And surprisingly, because we have a big partnership with OpenRice, and we give extra incentive. We do membership binding. We give extra loyalty. The business for takeaway has been the record high. And surprisingly, some of the restaurant business has been doing much better in May and June than ever. Because honestly, if there is a disruption, it's time for you to think where is opportunity and how do you step in to generate new ideas and to be able to match the gap. And on top of that, I think as a landlord, what we have done in terms of initiative, we noticed that the customer is more into health and wellness, whether the environment is safe and clean. So what we have try and invest is to put a lot of sterilization neon technologies, and even we import from Korea. I think we're the first one to have the escalator hand drill UV sterilizer. So instead of human cleanser, we actually put a machine there. So the customer, when they shop, or even the tenant, they will see, and the environment is safe, that we clean it every hour. We make sure that it's not many people condensed in one lift or escalator. So most of the shopper really appreciate this gesture instead of promotions. So these are the things that really help to boost the customer confidence. And I would say this is a good time to build a really strong relationship with all your clients, internally with your staff, and also externally with all the consumers.
So it's interesting as we moved and shifted now to a bigger direct to the consumer, changing the business model, seeing some of these things. One of the top and most important discussions as part of this now is also data, privacy, personalization, and really understanding how important that is. And privacy is a customer experience issue, in my opinion. And it's been interesting to bring up and have a little discussion about that. And certainly Brad, into that, saying, a big push globally is how are we managing this data and privacy? What controls are we offering them as this? And this is an important. And so, what are you seeing is in reference to this now happening, and what level are they having to come in and start at the very beginning?
So actually, yeah, it all starts with clear communication, correct? Normally, when we before we engage with people, or when we start collecting, normally we need to engage with them, and normally we in the marketing world, the best way and the most common way is doing it via a consent, which is essential to do, because when you collect data for marketing purposes, normally there's no contract or legitimate reason, what we call it in legal terms, in place to process the data and use the data accordingly. And this requirement is actually comes back in a lot of regulations, such as the GDPR and CCPA. So it's not that uncommon, and also there's all laws have a certain flavor of that, and some laws ask you for implicit consent, meaning that you can put it as part of informing them, or explicit consent, where you really need to ask them to sign off on something. So, but having said that, recently our Australian colleagues published earlier this year a paper on opting into meaningful consent, and that paper was actually it's actually downloadable today actually, and our colleague just published it on the LinkedIn as well. And interestingly, that investigation was based on website and mobile applications of Australian top 100 consumer brands, so really fit in this setting as well. And what they did is actually they examined the consent behaviors and attributes of these websites and apps, because normally the first touch point, or the most easy touch point, or the low threshold touch point, is really collecting data via a website or via a mobile app nowadays. And then that white paper, the research, was focusing on the type of consent and the point the consumer journey starts by collecting the data and using the data for a specific purpose, and whether the consumer is knowing that in an explicit way. You know, normally we collect, and then the consumer even don't know that they are giving the data for marketing purposes. And then they had 10 key findings, and I will not mention them all, but there are a few which are very, very interesting. So the first one is actually that 7% of the brands actually who did marketing activities not even mention that in their privacy policy, which is actually going against a lot of privacy laws actually around the world. In a lot of privacy laws, it is mentioned that you need to collect consent for that. And another interesting was also that 33% of the consumers agreed that their consent for non-essential processing is valid when it obtained to acceptance of the terms and conditions and privacy policy. And another third one, actually, which is also interesting, is that only 7%, which is a really, really low number, said that they have a good understanding on how the personal information would be used after consented it to be used. So that, you know, it's not a really good indicator for building trust with your customer as first engagement, because for marketing purposes, a lot of potential customers are not even your customer at this stage. And the last one which I want to share is actually 80% of the consumers, 83% of the consumers said that they were concerned about the internet cookies and tracking of the activities online and use, and that their information is used for marketing purpose to sell the information to third parties. So apparently, whether you do it or not, there is a kind of perception on that. I think, you know, we as a organization, if we want to do marketing activities, we need to make it very, very clear to them and win the trust with that. And these are some, I think, key findings which are quite important when, you know, engaging with customers, in particular for marketing purposes.
So
also,
sorry, I was just going to say, where do we come into this play as from marketers and business executives? You know, Steve and Mark, it'd be interesting. You're constantly dealing with that. Is this a post consideration? How are we actioning this? Because this is very complicated. I mean, talking about GDPR and where that comes in, and it has to, as Brad said at the very beginning in that first stage, you know, how are we trying to do this and manage this technical component of it as well? Because, you know, it's getting scarier and scarier. Look at Twitter. We had the hack even
yesterday or this evening.
You know, with the ex-president of the United States hack. So
well, luckily I'm not a celebrity, so that's all right.
I think this is an interesting point, and also I'd add on that we're actually being asked to give more and more data away post-COVID. In fact, thankfully the bars are open here in London, and Mark and I tested one out last week, but we had to give, and willingly, by the way, gave over our personal details to be able to have that beer. And I suppose that highlights the need that Brad talked about for that clear exchange. There was a value exchange there, and we were happy to give that information in that circumstance. And that clarity at the beginning when you're asking someone for their personal data is absolutely paramount and tailored or added to what we talked about previously, which was that human element and that credibility and that trust and that transparency that brands need to have. The two are going to sit together. So in order to get that permission to get that data, the brand has to clearly state what they're going to use it for. They have to clearly be believable in that. And as long as that deal seems fair, people will happily do it. I mean, on the cookie element, this is your specialist area. What's our viewpoint on that, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that 83% actually, Brad.
Yeah.
You know, obviously with Google kind of looking in a year, 2 years time to that third-party cookie is kind of going to go away. It's really interesting because I think, and Tiffany and I have really touched on it, is there's going to be more areas where you interact, more digital touch points, so to speak, whether that's physically in a store looking for kind of a map to understand where I'm going, right the way through to, you know, interacting with a vending machine or kiosk. It's all going to be digital. So there's those digital touch points, and we're collecting that information. And I think at the point of collecting, and I think, Brad, you made a very good point, is we give that information, that value exchange, like Steve and I did down the bar very happily, but it's what you do with it next. It's that moral responsibility of kind of, what am I going to do with that information? Have I educated you on how I'm going to use that? Am I progressively learning more about you? And again, Ed was kind of talking earlier about sort of, what am I saying to you? Why am I saying it to you? What are the needs that I'm addressing in that kind of hierarchy, and why am I doing that? And I think as long as we address those responsibilities and we're very transparent, then I think we're okay. But it is that transparency for me, and it is utilizing it in the right information, not selling it on, you know, or kind of follow me around the internet. We've all hated retargeting for years, right? You know, you buy something and then you suddenly see it a better offer for the same thing, and you bought it just 5 minutes ago. So I think it's that contextualization, it's that learning and utilizing it and having those use cases as a business to justify the capture of that data, because you don't have to capture everything. What's your need? Why are you doing that? And then off the back of that, what's the benefit to the consumer to create that relationship that we're all going to need moving forward? Because otherwise we're just going to ingest more and more data and just start, again, going out there and spamming people, and that's not the way forward.
And the advice I've given over the years to all the clients that we work with is, if you're going to ask for that information, ask yourself, first of all, would you hand your data over if you were asked in that way? And if the answer is no, then it's probably no from the consumer as well.
Where do we, with that moral responsibility, the ethical responsibilities being put in place, what happens as we start sharing this data? I mean, even we were talking about the Swire, the kiosk machines, the interaction machines, that we've got 20 payment systems. You know, how do we start sharing this data? Previously, we were looking at it, I think, Ed, you said the same thing as a funnel, right? We control the data, we had that. But as we become more and more connected, what happens to sharing, and how do we do this in a safe and ethical manner? And anybody's open for that answer that has a good answer on that one.
Well, I guess there's two elements to it to start the ball rolling. Darren, there's the safety element of it, and then there's the technological element of it. So, you know, probably dealing with the second first, there's a lot of tools and tech out there at the moment, and it sort of goes right back to your opening gambit on the digital transformation. Consumers have digitally transformed over the last 14 weeks. Businesses now need to do the same, and a part of that is making sure that all of these new data touch points and all of the old data touch points are talking to each other. And if they talk to each other well, then the communications that are delivered at every point back out to those consumers will make a lot more sense. So companies need to think about how they're going to do that transformation. And technology isn't the solution, it's an enabler. The solution is generally within the business itself, and having a top-down approach and the right structures and the right silos to be able to knit all of that together. It's a human problem, again, enabled by technology. In terms of the security side of things, I think that, you know, Brad's talked about that. You know, there's a lot of diligence, and Brad's probably more qualified than I am to talk about the processes and principles that are put in place to make sure that the data itself is secure. But again, it comes back to this: it's an absolute hygiene factor for companies to have security of data now. Every breach breaks a little bit of trust and confidence for everybody, not just for the company that's been breached.
Yeah, and just to add to that, actually, Steve, is that personal? You know, it's the unknown versus the known, right? So what do I know about you? Is it personal information? How long should I keep that? And again, Brad, you'll know a lot more about this than I do, but it's that kind of thing. I mean, there was a great example in the UK where they were looking at track and trace and keeping my personal information for 20 years. And to me, that doesn't feel right. You know, it feels a little bit like, well, why do you need it for that long? I'm happy to have the, you know, the anonymous stuff. That's okay for research and finding a cure for COVID. That's great. But why do you need all this personal information about me as well? So there's a balance there to be had. And I think again, it comes back to that ethical side of things and that question of why do I need it? Would you give it? And I think you've kind of got to look at it. And then, you know, there's lots of security, and we're always going to see in the news the Twitter hacks, you know, the change in legislation, whether it's Europe wanting to share data with the US. I think that's kind of a no-no at the moment. I think Privacy Shield's going to change. So it's about how we're you know, utilising that data, but making sure we're doing the best for the consumer. And look, at the end of the day, for the business as well. You know, it's what we need to drive the business, keep jobs, and drive revenue into people's pockets, right?
So how do you drive that across business? And Tiffany is an example. You're a landlord, you have retailers, you have data, you have shopping malls. How are you having the discussions to start sharing this data? Because if we don't share it, then how can you be effective in your marketing communications?
Well, I think to going back to the data sharing, I think now you see there are more data required by, you know, different campaign, different website, or even if you go, you know, drink a beer, as they mentioned, that you need personal information. So now what happened, I think, become normal is customers being fatigued about leaving personal information. The difficulty as a marketer is the cost of recruiting this data has been very costly because they opt out very easily. So once you have a campaign or Facebook, follow me, and, you know, and we get this information and recruit and subscribe me. The next day, they opt out, to unsubscribe. So I think the challenge for us so far as marketer is how you really have this stickiness with the data or the customers to stay with you and without, you know, opt out and unsubscribe. The cost of doing this becoming more expensive, and then you constantly need to reinvent and give creative idea. Okay, today I'm gonna give you a hand sanitizer, so subscribe me and opt in. But the next day you get this gift and then drop out. So you need to invest again to collect this data. So we have this problem with, as I learn more with our retailers as well, is how do we remain and keep the data, and how much we're gonna share? Because the more you share, the more risky it is. There are certain points that because we have consultants to review our data privacy policy, and because the board is very concerned on how much we share. So we are very confined with the information we share even with our landlord or with our partners. But we want to make sure that all our customers or the data that we own is compliant and is being safe. There's no leakage and it's difficult to be hacked. So we have invested a lot of money in protecting our data privacy. So even some of the retailers in this difficult time, they want to send EDM, they want to send information to our clients. We will send on behalf of them, but we will not share the data as much because just to make sure that our customer has been, data has been protected and it's not being, violating the regulations. But I think moving forward, not only the data privacy is an issue, the cost of recruiting or to stay opt in and the price will have to be very expensive.
And Lou, from a brand, you're looking at Coca-Cola as an example. You're working through distributors and the other stuff. How do you build this into the equation? Working in from the retailers, from distributors, how do you bring the customer experience across these different networks and concerns?
Yeah, certainly we have to consider every aspect of the touch points. You know, obviously with the direct to consumer, we have a direct relationship with our consumer, but the beverage business, you know, is so much based on a reselling and distribution. So with that, we also have a lot of partners, you know, creating all this information. Is most importantly, is in the end of the day, what does the consumer want and how are they responding to the action we're taking? And so for our data, you know, that we, through our data collected, that we learn about how each location are performing. You know, we can be really drill down to each geographically location, say, you know, Causeway Bay, Central, wherever our stores or our vending machine are. So we'll be able to tell, you know, what kind of consumer behavior, what should we be feeding to the market. But this information at the same time, you know, in a volume business, it helps you to see the market movement, product development, and it is not as critical as per individual. The individual will give you a lot more indication about interest, the response time, because if you don't have response in the first 1 to 2 weeks, then you know that, you know, whatever you're doing is actually not working. You got to change immediately. And so we're very, very careful in terms of how we actually collect this information, how we're going to store, who are we going to work with. You know, we'll be very, very strict with information and, you know, data that we collect and how we store it, where are we going to store it. You know, it's probably another topic, another subject to say, you know, these days data are actually being stored in cloud. So for us last year, we improved our e-commerce site to allow our business consumer to be able to place their order online. So at that time, we weren't offering to our consumer. So with Hong Kong, the protests happened. A lot of streets are very inconvenient for people to go out. So we started to see, you know, a business starting to log into this information. Although we do have a lot of companies say, look, you know, as much as you have all the information about our company, our account, we're not really going online. You know, we're not staying connected because we're not sure, we're not familiar with, you know, how the data is being used online. But with everything happening and progression into COVID-19, the need is much bigger because sometimes for us to be able to have all this information, we know when our customer are actually going to place an order or receive it. It doesn't really mean that it's actually going to be able to deliver as what we wanted. Give you an example. You know, during the height, you know, at the height of a protest before the COVID start, sometimes we actually would have maybe 50% of the order undeliverable. It's not that they can't, you know, place order. Sometimes the people cannot go back to office. So without these kind of information being stored in our database, we won't be able to reach out to them and say, look, we're going to be 2 hours late. Would you be there to receive your order? So these kind of user experience based on very limited data collected give you so much more, you know, for a business to be able to operate much easier and safer, and also for our consumer to be able to continue to have a very seamless consumer behavior.
So how do we, you know, bringing this all back, we've got this a lot of this data, Ed, you know, how do we bring this back to customer experience and segmenting and data models? You know, how do we bring this back to effective use in building out a better customer experience?
Yeah, I think, you know, when I was listening to the guys from HH talking before, I think one of the things that came to my mind is something that we've talked about is, how do you, from the client side, how do you stay safe as a company? And I think, the other speakers have said the same thing. I think if you operate from a perspective of good values and with good intentions, it's harder to go wrong. So what we're saying is, as the guys, I think HH said it well, technology is an enabler. So what's the driver? I think it has to be, how can we improve the customer experience? And I think if that's the question, then you just go find ways to do that, rather than how can I add an AR, filter, in the airport when maybe someone doesn't want one. So for example, one of the things that comes up in relation to data is there is a bit of a conflict between, on the one hand, we hear a lot, customers want personalization and they want connected experiences. So for example, personalization, we all know what that means. In terms of the connected experiences, I think we can all relate to this one. It's really cool that if you go on the app, if you go on the Cathay app and you say, I want to upgrade my ticket, I want extra legroom, when you go to check-in, you want the person at the check-in counter to already know that. Or, when you're in the plane for the flight attendants to say, oh, Mr. Chuckry, you asked for the extra legroom, so here's your seat. So that makes you feel like data and technology is working for me, rather than you being hounded for stuff that you don't want. And I think it's up to the brands and our agency partners to just not screw it up. I think if we do the right thing, it'll help out. And then people will see that, well, you could argue that it's not really avoidable anyway. I mean, there's so much who doesn't use Google Maps? I mean, if you don't share data, it doesn't really work. But I think it's up to us to not make it a hard choice for customers. Make it a no-brainer. And then I think it's pointing in the right direction.
How do you create this new world of connectivity? And Brad, from your point of view as well, from a technology and data and privacy and risk, how are you having a creative conversation anymore? Everything's like, you can't do this, you got compliance, you have risk. How do we bring back the creativity, the customer forefront to this?
Yeah, I think we discussed it and touched it already by Steve and Mark and Tiffany and Louis and Ed as well. I think it's not a new challenge to put like that. It's always there, and I think it's all about building and maintaining people's trust, because as the basic principle says, if you have his consent, you have his trust, and you tell him openly and transparently what you're going to do it, and he's okay with it, through certain barriers, of course, then we are able to do it. So, and then I think it's there are several principles which I believe they should be held upon, and one is actually what Steve Mark mentioned before, is be upfront. Before you collect the data, include the benefits of the data sharing, and also what you're going to obtain and what's in for them, correct? And what's going to happen with the data. And also you need to be clear how you will use the personal data, correct? It's not that I collect it, I can use for whatever reason I want. You need to be really clear. I'm going to use it. Maybe I want to improve my product, correct? I might be going to sell you something specific, or what, So these are some teams, and also don't always rely on privacy policy and terms and conditions. And as I mentioned before, only a small percentage of people understand it. So we also need to make it clear to them, and also ask them explicitly to understand those for that. And also,
it's a big process. I mean, overall, trying to just integrate this. I mean, and it'd be interesting for everybody that's tried to put it into. I know that Tiffany, you've been working on the customer experience for years, and Steve and Mark and everybody. This is a massive process, a massive transformation. How are we taking what's your advice on taking key steps? Let's call them baby steps, wins, quick wins. What's your advice to people? Because it is overwhelming. And I open this up to anybody on the panel that says, having gone through it on the long term, how do we get going quicker and with different teams?
I think the interesting thing here is if you'd sat down with any CEO before COVID and said, right, in 5 days, 7 days time, I want your entire workforce to be at home, online and operating as they are at the moment, they would have all said it can't be done. And yet it's been done. So this situation has driven rapid change. And what Ed described, that exact customer experience he described about me walking into the airport and being recognised and getting the right legroom and the stewardess knowing my name, that's all perfectly doable. So the question is, why hasn't it been done? And the answer is usually because something else took priority, because it was put in the too tough tray, and it just didn't happen. So what has happened is that things have just massively accelerated. The world's accelerated, consumers have accelerated, things that we didn't think could be done have now been done. That should be the wake-up call for CEOs in all organizations to go, do you know what, we can do it. It can be done. If we just push the pedal hard enough from the top down the organization, we can do all of these things. And that, I think, is the change that will now happen, because companies have to protect their customer bases. They have to grow again. They have to restart. And therefore, these things have to happen. And yes, it's difficult, but it's not impossible, because everything's just proven that. But as long as there is a top-down will for this change, this human change enabled by technology to make it happen, I think all of the things that are being described and all of the customer journeys that we have often put up on whiteboards and said, wouldn't it be great if, it can be done, and it can be done now, and the impetus is there for us all to do it.
I think as well, just to pick up on a couple of things, you mentioned, Darren, baby steps, and Steve's just talking about, well, if you'd ask the CEO, can you use Zoom? Can we all do this like we're doing today? We're not all perfect, but we've learned, right? And it's around testing and learning. And if those limited budgets are going to be there, we need to understand what's going to be the most effective when and quickly. So it's about that agility, to turn a whole workforce who are in the office to be able to work from home and work together, right the way through to how can I be better with the consumer, be progressive about what I'm doing with them. Is that working? Do they like it? Are they engaging with me? If they're not, we switch it off, we move on. And transformation has always been a long kind of, we've all seen at least 2-3 year roadmaps, right? So let's take those baby steps, test and learn those baby steps, and then move forwards. And we've seen that we can be agile in all organizations. So now's the time to really take, and the word opportunity and positivity has been bandied around today, right? And now's the time to use that, because there's never been a better time out of a crisis to come and say, right, we've learned something, let's now learn something new and keep testing and keep learning.
So I'm going to quickly come to some questions coming in from the audience on that. From Christopher said, what do you see the current state of partnerships? Because in this new world, isn't partnerships critical, and not just functional partnerships, but changing business model propositions, strategic partnerships? How do you see the new world of partnerships changing? And this is, let's say, who wants to respond to that?
Me. Can I?
Yes.
Can I answer to that? Yeah, because I think this is a good question, because a lot of time we try to change quickly, but you are unable to cope with this capability in a very short period of time. Partnership really help to move things faster, because what we experience is we did a lot of partnership with different vendors, including delivery service, in-app, F&B partners, and also some of the technology we're unable to work on, but we get a quick solutions. So I think really moving forward, partnership will be one of the things that will give you, flexibility in the organization, meeting the change. And I think that partnership is not only restricted to certain industry. You really give you lots of room in terms of thinking forward. You need to have creative thinking that if I'm move forward with my organization, what partners will give me more, value-added propositions and to develop my business. I think with the dynamic of the, business, partnership will be one of the most efficient and cost-effective way of, being agile and so far. because that's what we experience. We do a lot of quick fix at cost-effective movement with a lot of different partners. But one of the key things with partnership is you really have to be able to strive for what you want, because there is no strict rules. There is no plans, and there's no limitations. Everything is according to discussion, negotiation, and people need to have an open mind to get a better synergies, to get a positive strategy together, to reinvent the future. I think partnership is a good way to make a quick fix.
So as we reinvent, David asked this question in reference to our budgets are shrinking. We talked about the current climate, the numbers are going down, the financial people are looking at stuff. It's just, how do we start to value and bring back value to some of these new ways of operating? Is it something that we've just forced to? Or how are these solutions and boardrooms focusing, and where's the marketer's role as part of this? Are we leading that charge, or are we sitting back and waiting for the CEO to take this?
I think there's, it was me that raised the point about the inherent sort of problem that we're being faced with budgets and being forced to use a smaller budget for the same or better effect. And there's two sides to that for me. One is wastage, which I believe is inherently built into the system at the moment. And I think your question is, what can marketers do? Well, marketers can think about where they go for specialist services now. The traditional model, and I'm going to say this out loud, I think the bigger agency groups from which I hailed originally are not quite geared up for the new world of today. And there was a good analogy made by a friend of mine who talked about having an extension built on your house, which you pay $50,000, or you get a quote for $50,000 for the builder from, and then he outsources it to somebody he pays $30,000, and he outsources it again to someone he pays $10,000. So you pay $50,000 for a 10,000 extension on your property. And I think that's what's been happening a lot of the time with marketing budgets up to now. So my point is, if you go to the guy who's going to do the job and the specialist at doing that job, you're paid $10,000 for a $10,000 job, which is what you had before. So that starts to eliminate wastage out of the equation. And the second bit then is the efficiency. And that for me is all about data and managing the information that you're receiving in and measuring the right things. So a lot of measurement now is done on what happened. So it's passive data. I got that amount from that, it cost me that amount, and there was that many clicks or whatever. And what they don't look at quite often is the cause. So why did that happen? And that's the big thing that we need to focus in on. Those are the numbers, but why did that happen? And if I can understand why that happened, I can change it. Mark talked about it. It's test and learn. It's monitoring and measuring the right things and then changing what happens as a result of that. So you eliminate the wastage and you get more efficient about what you're doing with your budget. And that for me will be the way that we get the same result from a smaller budget moving forwards.
Okay, and it's an interesting question now. We talked about human empathy and that we've come together. There was a question as we reflect and look into our inner lives and we start to see the impact that we have, that we were using, the amount of food, cloth going out, dinners, drinks, overconsumption. People start realizing that this has become such a more important component to them. How do you live more mindful? How do we do this? We expect this from our brands and our marketers. How do you consider and include this into your business operations? And I guess either Lou or Ed, where is this becoming a critical element, and how is it really fitting into overall structure?
Lou, can I pass that on to you?
I'm not sure I have the most perfect answer, but for my business, since it's consumption, it's beverage. So we see actually a lot of these actually become better because, as people spending more time at home, and so they're actually becoming a little bit more experimental. At the same time, it's going back to basic because, it's the basic need to start with, but then once you actually carry on for so many months, now the basic need is actually not enough to keep us entertained to be locked down at home. So people becoming more interested in seeing what is new, what is out there, and company is trying very hard to make sure that it would do whatever it can in terms of innovation, approach, or business development to ensure that the business survive. Many of the business these days are not because they are not good, it's because the cash flow issue. How they can turn during this period when people are not going out, when consumption is actually dropping. So survival is the bottom line that drives all the changes. And so from two sides of the coin, is business actually need to look at what else to do to make sure that consumer continue to be interested. But at the same time, this interest got to be able to convert into a revenue. There are a lot of things we can do. The better we manage our data, the better we understand our consumer, the better we can serve the market. But at the same time, all these new things we try or we wanted to try, it has to be able to deliver the kind of revenue that lasts you through a period of time, hopefully longer, because right now nobody knows how long it's going to last. So before, people are not really looking at the burn rate as much as as now, because burn rate mostly talking about new startup as a business that might be more risky. But right now, burn rate is looking at every single company. So we have to look at an overall picture of a long-term development from every aspect of brand's decision.
So how do we, Ed, if we come back to this in that way, if we're looking at this from a personal perspective and caring for your passenger, I think, as you said, we had a question that says, how do you, caring for your passenger, reassure them again against processing refunds for past tickets, caring for them over that, where does it cross over into priority now, and how do you deliver value to certain elements of this and turn it into a business and a financial decision?
I suppose the big picture for us is survive today and then set ourselves up to thrive tomorrow. And I think the way to do that is we've got to be very careful right now with, conserving our cash. We're not really flying anywhere. So, there's been a lot spoken about how we're trying to do that. But then I think doing the right thing sets you up to thrive tomorrow. And I think that's, you make those investments. So I think our strategy is to reduce all of the costs that aren't going to come at a cost to the future. That's how we're thinking about it. So, the refunds and investing in helping customers to see how we're doing everything we can to keep them safe. I think they're all investments, they're not costs. I think they're investments. But I think, the other thing I think that's related, I want to just share something, this whole thing about this new normal, and relates to the last point about sustainability and, are consumers going to change all of their patterns? I actually think that this new normal thing is, we should just get rid of this language. I think it's us talking it all down, right? We are confirming with this language, this is a new normal. I mean, who knows it's the new normal? Nobody knows. But in the social media age, we all want to jump on the meme and then be a part of it. And the new normal thing, it's a big kind of scary story that this is going to be here forever. I disagree, because I think before COVID, who amongst us traveled for no reason? Travel is expensive, both in terms of time and money. I don't think anyone ever traveled for no reason. So I think the thing that's going to dictate people coming back or spending and consumption is just when you feel like you're financially ready to make that decision, when you have the ability to pay, and then when you feel safe enough, you have the willingness to pay. So I call poo on all of that new normal business. And I say it's up to the job of marketing to inspire people to come back to lead the life that they want to live, rather than living that life in the shadow. And I just think we're going to be really careful of not just leaping to the latest scary kind of talk. And if anyone's going to do it, it's the marketing people, you know, because we're the people of the future and we're the people of what's possible. So time to settle up, I say.
I love that point. We've got 10 minutes left. We want to go some rapid fire finishing here. Some quick lessons. You know, if somebody is going to ask you the biggest takeaway that you've learned that you could give advice to marketers, what would that be? And everybody, rapid question. We'll start off with Steve and Mark.
Which question? There were two in there. So what's the biggest lesson
that you've learned that you're going to give advice to marketers? That, you know, the one thing coming out of this experience that you've learned and your advice that you would give to current marketers?
Look, I think what we've all learned is anything is possible. Anything is possible. We couldn't possibly have called the outcomes in each of the markets that happened as a result of this. So I believe anything can be done. And if you're a young marketer coming in, what a great opportunity. Unencumbered by things that have been done previously, you can forge your own path in this new world, this new interesting digitally led world. And I think you know, just go for it. It's an innovative world, and I like the point that Lou made earlier. If you can see it in the shops now, it's probably too late. So there's a great opportunity for innovation out there, and that favors the guys who are coming in without preconceptions and without that history behind them. So yeah, that would be mine.
For me, it's embrace the change. We've all kind of embraced where we've been, you know, good or bad, and I think we've got to embrace it moving forwards. I think to Ed's point, which was a great one, you know, no one knows what the future's going to bring and those behaviours. So I think you've got to embrace it, be agile and move with it. And hopefully that's being innovative. So there you go. Short and sweet, that is.
Brad, what's your advice?
I think we're heading for a very, very challenging situation. I think for marketeers, where I think in the old days your marketing environment is smaller. I think we're going to global level where digitalization, and due to COVID-19, it I think accelerated as well. Before, you know, it was already ongoing, but we see a lot of companies moving much more faster also in digital environments. So I think challenging times are coming for marketeers.
Tiffany, personal advice.
Personal advice, stay positive. I think it is a new deal, but it's not an ordeal. For all of the marketers, make a change. You need to stay positive and drive the strategies, you know, to give hope to the futures, you know, raise of hope on the horizon. And this is part of our life. And this is why we need a marketer to make things, you know, to be resilient for the future, so that whenever it happens, imagine this is the worst time ever. What can be worse? So try our best. Tomorrow will be better.
I do not want to answer that question. Hopefully, nothing can be worse, right? We'll go to Lou.
Okay. Well, I would say be innovative and adaptable. You know, keep trying and keep refining. You know, it's the changing world. We will not be staying at one point. You know, who knows that right now Hong Kong is in phase 3, but the rest of the world is actually far from phase 3. So we need to actually look at, you know, every opportunity that's happening around the world and see what make it work, what make people take, and then innovate and try and refine and refine and refine.
And I guess Ed, round it up.
Sure. Well, yeah, I think it comes, you know, maybe we do think about in these challenges what it means to us personally. I think it does, you know, when you see, you know, the challenges that we're facing, I think you come away with it with some sense that we all need to be kind and helpful to each other, I think, in these times. And I think that hopefully goes a long way. And I think we need to all fight for the life that we want to have and not settle for the new normal. Let's not become small little creatures who live in caves. I think, you know, let's go out there and live the life we want, you know, full of joy and happiness and sharing and all the innovation that we need to make it happen. You know, I think that's what we need.
And as we are embarking this new time in rapid transformation, I think as we look at customer journey maps from Marion said, how are they being rewritten and how do we do it quickly? How do we react quickly as marketers? These are things that used to take, Ed, you talked a while before about the importance just the other day about how long we have to do this under brand strategy, but we have to act, we have to take quicker actions along this journey. Last thoughts on anybody from that perspective. How do we do it quickly? What's that advice? How do we get it through our operational systems in a quicker way?
I was going to say, I think we've got the opportunity, you know, with all of the touch points out there now, you know, traditionally, and Steve touched on it at the front end actually, around research, you know, and market research being traditionally looking backwards. We can see, and you've seen all these papers come out over the last 2 months, 3 months of behaviors and change and understanding. We've got techniques out there that allow us to understand, you know, people's personalities and that, from how they write to the content they consume. And so we've got those natural research panels to let us understand better. And if we set the KPIs correctly, you know, those indicators, or, you know, what results we're looking for, is it engagement? Is it, you know, return on investment? Is it longevity and lifetime value? Whatever it is, we can see that quickly now. It's not, it doesn't have to be AI. It doesn't have to be machine learning or anything like that. The data's there, and the natural research is to use the techniques we've always done, but just use it on real-time data. And I think for me, that gives us the opportunity to move quickly and pivot, whether that's utilizing the retail stores in a different way, like Tiffany was saying about yoga classes, and then selling. You know, different experiences can be done, and it's about learning what's working, and that's that test and learn and utilizing that real-time data to do that.
Well, I think it's interesting that we all have to have our personal journeys challenged as well as along this path. And I've talking to a lot of business leaders recently, and it was a question of how much is everybody taking on their own learning, taking on their own initiative, not driven by a company, not driven by this quick transformation. And I think we have to take our own personal advice, and creative collaboration is a critical component, as we said, as we've wrapped up this empathy, and how do we start to work together as teams. And I think the operational structures is the biggest part that has to be changed, that I've seen in the discussions, and that data is just a tool set. We have in video conferencing tools now, 6 months ago, we might have had 20. We have 350 as of today. In consumer data platforms, we have over 5,800 different software choices. And I think it's all coming together from the collective teams and setting the business values, and how do we collectively work together is a key component that we're all bringing this together. If there's one word, we're going to come back to some of these things that have changed in wrapping up. We started with Steve. Are you going to change a word?
I used the word lucky because I still get up on a Monday morning and want to do what I do for a living, and that makes me quite lucky, I think. So I'm going to stick with that.
Mark?
I'm going to stay with inquisitive, because I think during these times we need to be, because I think that allows us to be innovative and affect change. So the more we inquire and the more curious we are, the more fun we can have moving forwards.
And Ed, you shifted, you're determined. All right.
I'm shifting again, Darren. I'm going to fight. I'm going to fight. Yeah. Getting tough.
That's good. I love that. And Tiffany?
I'm gonna stay with the original positive.
Positive. Okay. Brad?
I will stay with opportunities. I still believe we are getting a lot of opportunities due to the changes.
All right. And Lou, you're going to change. You're the last one. What's your last point we're going to say here?
Well, still innovative. I think it entails everything that's, everybody said. It gives you the opportunity to look at things the same way and differently, or totally, out of the box, because without innovation, we're not going to be able to get through this phase of time.
Well, this has been a quick 90 minutes. We were scared that 90 minutes was too long, and it was great. We still have a lot of people participating. We want to thank all the panelists HH Global, Blueberry Wave, appreciate the sponsorship and efforts. And definitely to everybody out there, thank you. Fight, be determined, be creative, and collaborate. And we have, speaking of this, in August, we have a new series come up with Facebook called Curated for the marketing side. Curated at Hong Kong, it's thought leadership. And the first one we're gonna have is August 11th. And it's going to be the future of communication, and it will be a virtual global conference. We're looking forward to that. So thank you, everybody. Good night. Stay safe, stay healthy, and until next time.